Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast broadcast of This Week in Science. Justin has puffy hair. What are the physics related to that? Someone needs to do a dissertation. Kevin Unique, has it started yet? Oh, yeah, it just started. We're here. You don't have to wait anymore. Is time now. And as everyone who watches the show regularly knows, this part of the show is to tell you that we're going to start the real show in like a couple of seconds. The real show is edited and made a little bit more streamlined. We get rid of the ahs and the troubleshooting parts when internet breaks and other things happen. And so if you want that, you can find This Week in Science as a podcast, wherever podcasts are found. Or, I mean, I don't even know anymore. It's all over the place, everyone. There's an RSS feed. You can subscribe to it. But if you like being here live and joining us in the chat rooms and having a conversation while we have a conversation and being part of the conversation, well, yeah, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, this is where it's at. And those of you who are here right now, we're here. And it's time to start the show. Yeah, you ready, Justin?
Let's do it.
Okay, is everyone else ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? Yay! Good evening, everyone. Okay, let's do this. Likes and all the pretty hearts and all the things for the algorithm are appreciated right now. Let's get moving for a night of science. Starting the show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 985, recorded on Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. Will robots labor for us? It's a big question. I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we will fill your head with space winds, dogs and cats, and robots in your house. But first,
disclaimer. The following program contains science-related conversations pulled from the headlines of recent research. Hosts make every effort to ensure the conversations are accurately reflecting the content of the studies they are talking about. If you find a story or subject interesting and want to learn more, links to the studies can be found on our website. There's a whole lot of science going on, and we offer just a slice of it here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day, every week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki.
and a good science to you too, Justin, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. Our co-host Blair is not going to join us this evening. Unfortunately, we hope that she will be back again next week. Life throws wrenches every once in a while. What is it? They throwing a spanner in the works. Anyway, Putin's cat was at dancing live. Yes, it was not recorded. We just danced on live internets.
We
Hey,
should
everyone.
just record the dancing once, and then we could play it like
Just
an
a
intro.
video and just
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I've now realized we've spent a lot more time dancing than we needed to.
I like dancing. It's good.
Yeah, I
Really,
have
really
no
good.
regrets.
Well, everyone, we have no raggets about this show that we are bringing to you tonight, and we have all sorts of science news that we're ready to talk about. I have stories about solar winds and sails, some cooling advancements, butterfly wings and their colors, their spots. Where do they come from? Dog toys, cat play, shark hunts, and lots of robots for the end of the show. I hope that you will be here for that one. Yeah, a little bit of scary stuff. That's all. Justin, what do you have?
I've got a Starliner update. When's it gonna come home? I've got
This week, I've got it on my calendar. I'm going to be watching.
a delve into Viking violence and culture. Quick one. A new way that planets might be forming. That's
New?
faster than the current
Faster,
theory.
better, more efficient. Build your
Mhm.
own planet today. Okay.
And then a prospector's tip for where to find the gold. New study that has found a very interesting connection between where gold is found and why it is found there.
Beyond what we've already known about uplift and
It's actually what we've already known as far as like where, kind of, but now we know maybe why.
fantastic. I want to know why. And then I'm going to go prospecting.
Yeah.
Right
Now we're
now,
gonna go digging with robots.
yes, our laboring robots, gold digging robots. Oh my goodness.
That would be fantastic.
Oh, I can't wait. Everyone, I hope you're ready for all of these stories and so much more because, as we do, we sometimes go off script. There is no script. And we have a really
wait, we have a script? Oh, no wonder I've been having such problems staying on the subject.
But now it's time for the rest of the show. And before we get there, just want to remind you, if you are not subscribed to TWIS, you can find us streaming weekly live Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And you can also find us as a podcast, This Week in Science, where podcasts are found. If you need links to stories and other things, as Justin mentioned in the disclaimer, head over to twis.org and you can find all sorts of links and lots of fun things. That's a great place to go. Good resources. All right, everyone, click those like buttons, share the show. Let's begin in outer space, where it's kind of windy. There's a lot of, there's stuff out there in the great wide void, not really void of space. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. But let's start first with a story. NASA this last week has opened the sails of its Composite Booms Deploy mission. This is the ACS-3 Advanced Composite Solar Sail System, and it has set sail. It's it's twice the altitude of the International Space Station orbiting Earth. This Advanced Composite Solar Sail System spacecraft, say that 10 times fast, has been heading around the Earth for a while, but now they have opened the sails. The booms have been deployed and the sail is actually opened. And the idea behind this solar sail system is that it will be gathering energy from the solar wind, and it will be using the solar wind for its movement, for its navigation, for the maneuvering abilities. And so they said that there was supposed to be high resolution imagery from the cameras of this sail available today, but it isn't there yet. So for now, what we have is CGI video of the deployment of the sails. But this solar sail system, it's like 4 triangles coming together to make a square sail with the craft in the center. And they're a little arced so that the solar wind propels the ship forward. And they're going to be maneuvering the ship up and down in altitude around the Earth. It's not going anywhere yet, but it might eventually. Pushed by light from the sun. It's very exciting.
So it's also just such a human thing, which is what's kind of wonderful about it. Like the idea of setting
sail. Yeah.
Like in ancient times,
Yeah.
unfurling a sail, and then instead of the wind, it's the sun this time, pushing us out through space. It's kind of a nice nostalgic ring to it.
It really does. And it's, very fun that we're moving on this. There are other craft that are already using ion-driven propulsion that are building the speed of the craft as they move away from the sun. But this is going to be a much more basic test of this, this idea as it, without any rocket propellant, no ions needed on the craft, no nuclear anything, no gas, no anything. And where could these spacecraft go? How far could they go? Maybe there will be, the next explorers robots going places no man has ever gone before, powered by sail. Yeah. Also, this last week.
Sorry. I was just going to say,
go
and
ahead.
we talked about that. Is it important that it's people in space? And there's a great, there's a great deal of connection to having people in space. And then we have then we've got these astronauts who are stuck for 8 months.
Yeah.
And we're concerned about how exactly to get them back. And there's all this.
3
If they were
hour
robots,
tour.
if we put robots up there and they were on the space station, we're like, it's going to take 8 months to get them back. People would be like, well, come home when you come home. It's fine.
That's all good.
It would be fine.
Yeah.
Robots don't care. They're just wherever they are and they're happy with it. But
They are.
yeah. So there's a much less limited mission with robots in terms of having to come back. And in terms of life support, they have other things that they need, but it's not like as heavily resource dependent as humans are. They can be much more self-sufficient, and they can return the data that we need just as well. So, robots in space is totally the future of NASA. It's got to be.
Yeah, the Muppets got it wrong. Anyway, and NASA also.
Wait, hang on. Just because you brought it up, we could actually create Muppet-like robots and put those in space.
It's true.
Then,
Animated. Yeah. Yeah.
If for no other reason,
you're right.
If for no other reason to really confuse any kind of life form that finds them eventually in the deep of space.
Putin's cat is wondering in the chat room if a solar sail is more efficient than solar panels that create ions. And I would believe that because of the lightweight, I mean, not that space weight makes a huge difference, but mass is important. But the structure of the sails and the surface area and the photons hitting the sails, it's a direct impact, which imparts momentum as opposed to having energy loss through conversion to ions. And so the solar panels creating ions and then creating a drive that moves forward. I imagine that there would be a lot more involved in it. Yeah.
Plus there's no atmosphere, which might impact. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a great question, but that is definitely going to be a question related to, I think, energy loss in the process of transformation from one state to another. And anyway, speaking of energy states and transitions from one state to another, forever, researchers have been like, okay, what's going on around our planet? We have definitely an atmosphere. We have a magnetosphere. We have a lot of layers of stuff that kind of keep things around the Earth so that we don't lose our atmosphere as in Mars. And so researchers from NASA just recently launched a craft off. Where did they send it from? Is from the poles and from I'm not remembering the name of the place where they sent it from. But anyway, these researchers at NASA's Goddard Space Center, they created a suborbital rocket that they launched from the North Pole, Svalbard. There we go. Yes, Norwegian archipelago, depends on where you put the emphasis. Not quite at the North Pole, but close enough to launch the rocket into that area of the atmosphere directly above the North Pole. And in doing so,
it's also wild. I only knew that was like a small fishing village on this. Like, I didn't know they were launching rockets from
it's
this
a
place.
launch site, apparently.
I thought it was just like a small fishing village with some like oldie time buildings and like a neat place. But they're launching rockets from there. That's so cool. It's like an island north of Norway. It's like in the craziest location where you think like nothing is here. No, there shouldn't be any people here.
And rocket launches. And I believe that's where the seed bank is, trying to store our seeds, which maybe they're thinking about putting on the moon now because everything's melting. So we, thanks to our wonderful central dynamo in the core of our planet, have a magnetosphere. We know that magnetosphere has a north and south pole because it's like a dipole magnet, makes our planet that way. And in doing so, we can see and measure those magnetic fields. And there are, a number of things that come from this. And the researchers for years have been like, okay, we're looking at all these measurements, and okay, we've got like these measurements of the magnetosphere, and we've got like other understanding of how things move based on their weight and where they should go. So electrons, when they come in, like cosmic rays come into the atmosphere and they kick into atoms, and the electrons are like, woohoo, want to go away. And then the other atoms are like, no, we're ionically, like, we're supposed to hang out together. And so they grab onto each other. And sometimes the heavy ions are like, hey, electron, let's go to Earth together. And they fall down out of the atmosphere. Other times, though, the electrons take the ion and they pull that ion out. And it's this field that has been suggested, hypothesized for 60 years called the ambipolar field. But we haven't had the technology to be able to measure it. So this rocket was set up to measure it. And what they discovered was this little teeny tiny charge difference. And this charge difference, it's, really like the amount of like a small battery, like one of those little tiny LED batteries or something, a little tiny battery, not even AA, but like tiny amount of charge that they were able to measure. And in measuring this, what they have determined is that this electric field, it lifts charged particles in the upper atmosphere to greater heights. And then there are other atmospheric interactions that probably speed them up and propel them out of the atmosphere. And so there is a polar wind that shoots out of our atmosphere from the North Pole and the South Pole. And every time astronauts or spacecraft or whatever, they fly over, it's like, oh, there's a funny little wind coming out of the end of the Earth. And they haven't been able to explain it. And now they think that this ambipolar field is just the right amount of charge and enough to be able to explain the phenomenon of the Earth's polar winds that the Earth creates. And now the question is, now that they know how to measure it and how to detect it, what does that mean? Like for the evolution of the Earth's atmosphere in the past and into the future? And how does that play into so many other aspects of life on Earth and our planetary change over its lifespan? Yep. It's been here all along. Just farting particles into space. Yeah. So anyway, polar winds, ambipolar field, new detection. It's exciting because it's an energy field that was hypothesized and only now detected. Ta-da!
So cool.
It is very cool.
Especially the part about like, theoretically that should be there. We have so much of science that starts, that is theoretical, and it's not until you get this observational science, which whoever figured out that this was probably there was probably sitting at their desk at some university, typing away on a computer, some cozy little university in a small university town where they could go out for coffee and croissants in between calculations. And then it goes into the hands of the observational scientists who have to go out to like one of the coldest places on the planet, launch a satellite, and then take the readings.
Yeah, you gotta hang out.
Whether or not this cozy armchair calculation is correct. And it's amazing to me how often it is, but also how difficult it must be to then figure out, okay, somebody wrote a calculation for a thing that should exist somewhere in the universe. How do we go figure out how to determine whether or not it's there?
Yep.
And they did.
And they finally did.
And in
Yeah.
this case, it was a successful confirmation. Very nice. Unlike that, what was it, the LIGO? Or no, not LIGO. LIGO did a great job. LIGO confirmed gravity waves. What was the other one we were talking about last time? The WIMP detectors.
Didn't detect it, but they narrowed the bounds for detection. So
but
closer
it's also
and
a
closer,
theoretical. Right? They're past the point where they said they should have found it a few times now, and they keep looking for more and more. They haven't given up, but it's not as
Scientists rarely give up.
WIMPs.
They just ask new questions.
Yeah, but the WIMPs theoretical side isn't as firm as like we know gravity exists and Einstein predicted a thing. It's more like because Einstein doesn't have a thing that was for dark matter, even gravity as a particle. Or the standard model could contain it, but also might not. Like we don't. It's a theoretical particle. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. But the tough work isn't again in creating the model. Well, that's not easy. But creating a model of these things, it's not easy. But it's a different kind of work that then is required to confirm these things.
It is hypothetical, theoretical versus
incredibly difficult to make these confirmations.
Execution. Yeah. How do you test it? That is the.
I don't think the WIMPs are going to make it. But that's again, my predictions have been correct and completely wrong in the past.
What about Starliner? What do you think Starliner is going to make it back? What do you think?
I think Starliner is going to not make it back, and only because this thing is cursed. The curse of the Starliner. Well, the fate of the Starliner has been confirmed by NASA. It will be sent home empty. According to NASA, the Starliner capsule will undock from the space station Friday evening. The self-driving capsule will then attempt to ground itself in New Mexico's White Sands Missile Range. Only 6 hours later, it's going to be getting home pretty quick. Astronauts.
But there's a reason why they're not putting the astronauts in it, and why there was tension, according to NASA, during the decision making. Patrick Pecoraro is saying he thinks it's going to burn up. What do we think?
You know what? I'm with you, Patrick. That's, and I think, you know what I think? I think that Boeing is going to put in a setting that makes sure it burns up. They don't want this thing looked at anymore. They're like, I don't ever want to see this again.
The self-destruct mechanism.
I think so. Yes. They'll just intentionally take a little bit of a bad angle. No, but they don't want to do that, of course. They want it back. But they're not going to be able to study what the problems were. So anyway, the astronauts who rode Starliner in the first place to the International Space Station are staying behind. They're hoping to catch a ride back to Earth with SpaceX in February. Fingers crossed that there's no problem with that one, or they'll be there even longer. Officials at NASA have decided it is too risky to take them back on Boeing Starliner, despite Boeing saying, we figured it out. Everything's fine. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams have the honor aboard the space station of closing the hatch between Starliner and the space station. They will also pack it with old, unused station equipment, their blue Boeing spacesuits, and other accumulated station trash. And I kind of wonder if they're going to be like, you got us here. It's so sad that you're going off alone. Or if they're going to be like,
see you later.
Goodbye. See ya.
Yeah.
I have no idea what their emotional state of this towards this thing is. SpaceX's Dragon capsule will launch with two people.
Astronauts aren't allowed to be emotional. This is just their job.
But they're also humans.
Roll with it.
Even astronauts are human beings.
Of course they are. Yes.
They're going to have attitudes towards their equipment for sure. SpaceX's Dragon capsule will launch with 2 people instead of the planned 4 crew members. Wilmore and Williams hope to return to Earth 8 months after what should have been a week-long test flight. Starliner's first test flight went so poorly in 2019, the capsule never reached the space station because it had software issues. Error, blue screen, the whole thing. 3 years later, they tried again and encountered still more problems. $1 billion of reinvestment and repair later, and the capsule will return home empty, having failed for a third time. Meanwhile, I think in the same time frame, maybe even a shorter time frame, SpaceX has brought like 9 crew members, as well as private customers, and done all sorts of stuff. So SpaceX versus Boeing, the clear winner.
We'll see where it goes. Future is still to be told.
There was. You're talking about you're going to watch it. There was an initial plan for Starliner to gradually depart the station in order to do some sort of a photo shoot of the space station.
But weren't the astronauts supposed to take those pictures?
I think it's coming. I thought, maybe is it pictures of Starliner as it goes?
I don't
know. Well, either way, that whole plan has been scrapped. Instead, the capsule will be jettisoned with some sort of spring mechanism to get it a safe distance away from the station before relying on its unreliable thrusters to get it the rest of the way out of NASA's mission in space.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thrusters. It's the helium thrusters that, I mean, the reason they're not sending them back with the astronauts is because that's like attitude control and a lot of the keeping the craft from spinning and moving properly.
All the super important things.
Super important. And so if they were to have it leave the space station slowly, could you imagine if something went wrong? It could it could really mess up the space station. That would be dangerous to everyone up there. And so I'm actually glad to hear that they have a fail-safe for a get out of here release. You know, let the Starliner like really get it away from the space shuttle. I was wondering about that. So thanks for sharing that information.
Yeah, it was a big concern. Like
where are they going to go?
It's not just the astronaut safety, but also the entire space station, everyone else, right? The section containing those thrusters you're talking about, the helium thrusters, are actually going to detach before the capsule re-enters. So those are going to burn up in the atmosphere. We're not even going to get to like take them apart and figure out what went wrong with them, which is unfortunate because that's actually the part that
we need to know.
That's the part you want. Like the capsule seems to be doing just fine. It's those thrusters that we now aren't going to get to really take apart and look at. So
that's unfortunate.
The capsule, if it makes it back, will be landing in the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico.
Convenient having missiles nearby where it's going to land. No, Friday. I'm excited. I'm going to be watching the news, seeing what's happening, seeing what they have available for viewing. I think it's going to be a nail biter for sure. Yeah. Beyond that, though, someone mentioned earlier the noises on the space shuttle. That was something that was reported last week after the last episode of TWIS. An astronaut on the space station reported to NASA having heard a strange, like sonar-like sound, except it was like dong instead of bling. It had a lower resonance to it, coming from the speakers, coming from Starliner. And so NASA said, all right, let's go figure that out. And apparently it was feedback from some microphone system or speaker system that had been left on. And that is the story as far as where the sound came from, if you hadn't heard that already.
Yeah. I heard that there was a strange sound coming. I'm sorry, but it
was aliens.
I was like, just one more thing. Like, it doesn't matter. We're already got the springs pulled back. Just tell us when to push the button.
Let it go.
Arlenor in the chat. When the astronauts return, will they fly back home on an Airbus?
No, they won't. Moving on from the heat.
Avoid any form of Boeing travel going forward ever. No, I like the flights. It's a good deal. It's shorter than the other flights, but yeah, I'm not flying Boeing.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of heat on Boeing and that question, but just like Earth, where it's heating up in various places all over. It's like, yeah, it's getting warm. It's changing. The climate is changing. And one of the big factors is energy use. One of the big things going into where we put energy that is, it's air conditioning. And that's like, we need it to keep cool and we're going to use it more as it gets hot. So, can we create more efficient, better cooling technology that doesn't use as much energy and is more sustainable somehow? Researchers at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, working with GD Media Air Conditioning Equipment Company Limited in China, have developed a personalized air cooling piece of technology. And this piece of technology doesn't use air conditioning. It's not pulling the air through it and using humidity and taking the heat out of the air. And it's not the same methodology. This methodology involves radiant cooling. So kind of like a heat pump, but instead of radiant heating, you can have like floors that radiate heat because you have hot pipes underneath them. This idea is radiant cooling, where there is physics and technology being used like a heat pump to pull heat out of the air and suck it, like basically store it, and then it radiates cool out into the room. So instead of air and fans and loud noises, it would be silent, because radiant cooling is it's not a loud process. It's not convective in the same way. And in this case, they say that the air quality would be better, and it could be personal, so each room could have its own as opposed to being attached to a larger air system, which might be safer for air quality in the end. So it's not mixing air from different places. The device is relying on PE films, and these PE films are part of the radiant aspect of getting the heat out. There's a high emittance coating over an aluminum panel, a PLA frame, a thermocouple. They have what they call a TEC module and a heat sink, a very large heat sink. And then there is a fan in the device, but it's not blowing air at you like an air conditioner would be. It is blowing the hot air away from the heat sink, allowing the cold radiation to radiate out at whoever is nearby. Their testing of this technology has shown that the proof of concept is valid. They were able to do thermal imaging and show that with the thermocouples and using this new radiant cooling device, they used less energy, created similar amounts of cooling, and it could potentially be a route to go that is a little bit better for our cooling needs as we look at a hotter and hotter future.
So at least from, I haven't read this study. I'm just looking at the pictures that they provide. I'm going to call nonsense.
Why?
There's no way to have this is going to be like, here's a scientific study that backs up this product that we're selling that's going to do personalized cooling, and you can have it for only $9.99 on the internet at some point. This won't work. You cannot have a cooling system that sits in a room with you. The heat does not get trapped within the unit and stay there, removed forever from existence. Like, the whole reason every air conditioner has to get put through a wall, right?
Right. I mean, yes.
Like, at least I'm just
the
going
heat
with the little
dissipation
picture.
is definitely a question, right? Where does that heat go
It stays
from
in
the
the
dissipation?
room.
Yeah.
Maybe it's putting the cold side towards the human, and that might feel nice if you're standing directly in front of it. But it's putting the heat that it pulled away from the human back into the room, heating the other side of this of the room higher than the average temperature of the room before. So, like, if you're trying to cool a home, this will not work. If you're trying to,
But it could be it could be adapted for home cooling. The way that they explained it is that it did work, similarly to a heat pump, and so the physics behind this is solid, and the cooling that takes place is real. But yeah, like maybe it's not just hot air into the room. Maybe they figure out how to dump it in a different way so that it does the heat doesn't stay in the room where the individual is. But the idea, I think, is, an interesting, different idea from the traditional air conditioner.
So I can give you one better that is completely and totally energy free. Yeah, almost. Yeah, pretty much. Well, yeah, energy free. You take a whole lot of piping and you bury it underground. And then you have vents into the home connected to this network of underground tubing. And then you open a little skylight.
Yes.
And all of the heat rises and it pulls air through this piping that was, buried underground, where the average temperature is a little below 50 degrees, for around 50 degrees, we'll just call it. And that air then fills the room. And then
are you talking about just the regular convective heating?
Thermal. If you're using thermal cooling, it's geothermal cooling. It's the planet underneath the ground. Actually, and then it can even be used for heating if it's extremely cold, because it's usually pretty stable. 50, maybe it's 58 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty cool. It's much cooler than
it is. Yes, caves underground are always cooler than it is up on the surface. Yeah.
So you can run piping of whatever, I don't know what length you would need to cool a home, but we just need to do some drilling, and then it's not 50 C. What is it? What would it be?
They are in height.
I think it was 14 C. What is 50 C? Is it 14? No, it's less than that. It's like 10, 9. Somebody has to do the conversion. I can't.
Who's in charge of math?
I'm not in charge of the math department right now. But you can do that, and you can actually power it by heat convection, because you just open up your little vent up top, and then you've got the heat that's rising will draw air from the underground tubing. I guess it has to have an exit somewhere. Draw the air from the underground tubing and pull it into the room, because it's replacing where the heat is escaping. The hot air is escaping. And that's zero energy. Now, does this work in a big building? Yes. How can it work in a big building, Justin? Because you just dig a bigger hole and put more piping.
It also depends on the location, because if you're near like geothermal stuff, then it's just going to be hot, and it's not going to be.
Well, I mean, you have to be really. If you're that close to a volcano, if you got that close to the geothermal,
we should talk to everyone in Iceland. They seem to be doing it right when it comes to their water. They have so much hot water.
The heat dissipates into the ground. Might be even a form of carbon or heat capture, I suppose.
The amount of heat the question is, does the heat dissipate into the ground? But and how much can the ground hold? I mean, there's a lot of heat capacity in the ground. The whole planet's hot. So we're very small to be putting heat in. Now, there are different technologies, different ideas. I was just sharing another idea from researchers trying to develop technology. I mean, yes, with a company to see what could work and what they could put together. Because
the problem is, I've seen a bazillion of these.
Yeah, but
I've seen so many of these products, these fake products that don't cool anything, because it worked in a lab, maybe, and then they're selling it all over the place with this scientific study showing how the heatsink works. And it's like, no, you can't have a personalized desktop air conditioner. It has to put the heat somewhere. You put it out the window, you put it down to the earth, put it into the sky. Somewhere it has to go.
Put it in your pocket.
I'm going to put it in your pocket.
No. Save it for later. I'm going to put it in a big giant salt cake that'll hold the heat until I need it, and then it'll power things and turbines and energy. It'll be great. Yeah, there's so
Yes,
many.
Potter Wolf, that is my solution to many things. Just dig a big hole, put it down there.
We can't do that for everything. Justin, you don't have another story for the first part of the show, so should I tell you about?
Do I not? Do I not? Did I not? Do I not?
It's not in the run sheet.
What? There it is. Oh no! Oh, not. It didn't make it. I can talk about all sorts of things. What do you want to talk about?
No, I have butterflies.
Okay, we'll talk about butterflies.
You make me so nervous.
Or as me and my children call them, flutterbys.
Flutterbys, yes. Flutterbys, butterflies. They're wonderful. Researchers have been studying the incredible natural design of the spots, the colors on the wings of butterflies for many years because they're fascinating. They're not just pigments. There are pigments involved, but many times there is a topology to the scales that make up the butterfly wings. And so what you see very often in like the blue morpho butterflies and others is that the wings themselves, the color you see is a result of diffraction and emittance as opposed to actually like a pigment where it's a different wave that gets released, a different wave of light that gets released. So you see a particular color. And then very often, which is interesting to me, is that there is a melanin on the backside. So on the, when butterflies are pretty when they're flying and then they close their wings and they've got like this brown undersides. All the butterflies and moths, they all look brown when their wings are closed. That is the melanin that is on the bottom side. And that very often is part of the structure of the wings so that the light that tracks its way through all the bumps and pits and scales on the surface of the wing that hits the cells and the melanin on the backside of the wing, it gets absorbed as opposed to being shot back out. So all of the scales and the pits and the bumps and the mountains at this nanoscale on the surface of the wing are there because they bounce light back out in a very special way, a particular way that creates the design that we see on the back of on the surface of the wings of the butterflies. Dig into butterfly wing structure. It is, I've gone down rabbit holes related to this stuff. This is so interesting. But okay, big question though. It's like, okay, right. This is from genes, right? There's genes, and the genes in the butterfly DNA are going to be the things that make the design on the butterfly wings. Where do the spots on the butterfly wings come from? Of course, from the genes. That's the way it works. So
I feel like you're going to tell me it's not.
I'm going to tell you it's a bit more complicated, which is what usually happens. It's a little bit more than just the genes. It is the genes, but looking more deeply into particular kinds of genes called, or not genes, but genes, actually parts of the DNA that are non-coding. So it used to be considered the dark DNA or the, it doesn't code for anything. They didn't call them genes. They didn't think they were these bits of DNA were really doing anything. They're like, what's this garbage in the DNA? What's it doing? So this long non-coding RNA that they looked at within this study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences this weekend by a team at George Washington University and the University of Cambridge. They found when they looked at a bunch of butterflies and they're like, look at their pretty colors and look at that, it's got to be genes and and let's figure out exactly what it is and how we can manipulate it, and can we do that with gene editing, and what's happening. And so they looked at the protein coding genes and they're like, this is like, it works, but there's something else. When the black pigments come in, there's no real gene that's involved. There's a gene for the black pigment, but they found a gene that makes an RNA molecule, not a protein. And it is in charge of where the dark pigments go during metamorphosis. And so the researchers used CRISPR to turn off this particular long chain non-coding RNA. And when they did that, they found that the black pigments did not
Mm.
go anywhere. Like they didn't even get expressed in the dots, the colors on the wings. So it's not a gene, but it is a gene. It's not a protein coding gene. It's a gene that impacts how and where and how much the proteins the genes that make the proteins get expressed and how they work.
So it's like an mRNA regulating setup. Very cool.
Yeah, it's RNA and it regulates.
It's RNA.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yep.
But,
and what? You said but?
Well, but that's isn't RNA basically?
Well, yeah. So you translate it into mRNA, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And so this RNA, yeah, it's a molecule, and it controls everything. They call this molecule, they call it link. What do they call it? It was it's in an area called the cortex locus. And this is an area that's responsible for all sorts of coloration and responsible for a lot of the things that happen during metamorphosis. And so this gene they found is called link, long non-coding, LNC RNAs. It's just part of a group. It's a category. It's a modulator. And
so it's what would have been called junk DNA.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Not too long ago. Yeah, it's DNA that's there. It doesn't get used for anything because it's not making a protein, and that's the only thing that DNA is for. And a lot of it is regulating other processes. Like it's all doing stuff.
Yeah. So I was looking for the name and I was trying to remember. Yes, long non-coding RNA, but this particular one they called ivory, because when the black pigment goes away, the wings are just ivory. There are other pigments that do result from genes, but black pigment specifically, they looked at 15 species of butterflies. They discovered that this is common across butterflies and not something that is just a singular event. And so just shows we have so much more to learn about the junk that's in our genes.
And also, this is also kind of a fun example of what could happen in a natural selection event.
Yeah.
Where if this little bit of DNA isn't, or RNA isn't being expressed or functioning, right?
So this is exactly, so that if we go back to historic natural selection experiments, like the dark and light morphs of the moths in, in London, England, when there was a lot of air pollution, versus like all sorts of natural selection experiments involving the black pigment and the coloration of butterfly wings, is not specifically changes in the genes that make proteins. It's probably related to this non-coding RNA.
Yeah, just a little regulator. And if if it's not regulating in one offshoot and they happen to be less preyed upon, suddenly those numbers start to rise up. And then you're talking about, hey, guess what? If you turn on this RNA, you can turn the pale butterflies black.
Yeah. So now I wonder, from mechanism perspective, how much we can look into some of those very kind of quote unquote classic examples of natural selection at a deeper level to see what was happening, like really what was happening there. Because I think this opens up a bit more a bit more questions. Yes. Pretty butterflies. They're more complicated than we thought. Yay! And we're going to learn all sorts of stuff from them. Da, da, da. Yeah.
As we go into the break,
Yes.
I am going to take a quick break, and then I will be right back. While you read the important information that all listeners must hear, I'll be right back.
Nobody will know that you're gone because you're going to come back right before.
I'll be back almost in time.
No. Hey, everyone. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of our weekly science talk show. We love talking about science, recent stories, discoveries, looking at them from a curious angle, and hoping that you find different questions and ways of looking at the world because of the show, and have some good conversations. You too can be the most interesting person in the room. If you like the show, please do share TWIS with friends of yours. Hit the subscribe button, the share buttons, share on social media if you still do that. Get your friends to listen. You can argue, debate these different techniques and the variety of science that is out in the world as we discuss it on the show. Additionally, if you're interested in supporting the show in an ongoing fashion, you can head to twis.org and click on our Patreon link where you can become part of our supporter community, and $10 or more a month, and we will thank you by name at the end of the show. And for every level, there are different rewards, stickers, t-shirts, other things that you will get for supporting us. But I mean, really, you get the show every week, and we appreciate your support. It really helps us keep the show going and make it possible for us to be here every week. We also have the link to our Zazzle store, where there's a lot of show merchandise. We have our TWIS items, and then also there's a bunch of stuff that has been created by Blair for the animal calendar every year. So original art, great stuff. It all goes to help support TWIS. And in the end, you can find it all at twis.org. And you really, really know, I hope you know, that we can't do any of this without you. You are so essential to making this show go, making it more fun for everyone. Thank you for being a part of this. We really can't do it without you. All right, I am going to come on back to more science. Blair's not here for the animal corner, but I have some animal stories. Who wants to hear stories about dogs, cats, and sharks? I've got stories for you about these things. Yes. So this last week, there were some fun stories. And I told myself, I hope Blair covers these. And she's not here, so I'm going to do it in her stead and hope that I do Animal Corner justice. First off, let's talk about toys, animal toys, the toys that our dogs love to play with. Oh my goodness. Your dog plays with toys. Sometimes cats play with toys, but do they play with you? That's a big question. Let's talk about that in a little bit. But recent research that just was released in a study in the journal Biology Letters by researchers Shani Dror of Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary, and I probably did not pronounce that correctly because I do not know how to speak or intone Hungarian. They've studied dogs and their memory for the names of their toys. So if you have a dog, if you've ever had a dog, dogs, they love their chew toys. They love certain toys, and sometimes people name the toys, but do the dogs really? They're like, oh, toy, whatever. What are they reacting to? Are they reacting to ball? Are they reacting to, it's the fuzzy wuzzy? Are they reacting to this pickle wickle? Like, what are they reacting to? What do they know? What do they remember? We know that dogs learn their names and respond to their names. We know that dogs also learn and react to particular words and commands that we give them. So what about their toys? Well, these researchers in their study, they show that, yes, indeed, dogs remember the names of their toys. Their dog toys are so important to them that they don't just remember the names of their toys for a little while after they completely tear out all the stuffing and you have to throw it away and get a replacement. No. Dogs learn and remember the names of their toys for at least 2 years.
So I've seen a demonstration of this anecdotally. The dog named Luna, which had, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 30 toys.
Aww.
And the owners would demonstrate, go get this toy. And the dog would go and grab that toy and bring it out. And I'd say, go get this toy. And the dog would go and grab that toy and bring it out. And it was just, I remember thinking wow, this is like the smartest dog I have ever seen. But yeah, I've seen this in reality before. So this is a great confirmation.
Yeah, and we know that like Australian Shepherds and other dogs, they've done some work where they've actually showed that the dogs are able to categorize and understand that, oh, that's a ball and that's a stick or a ball. Like they know which one to go get out of the box, right? They're not just yay ball. They actually know which one it is. So it's what's interesting is that their memory is so good that they remember the name of the toy for that amount of time. Like, why? Why would you remember the name of Stuffy Wuffy for that long? Is it why? Anyway, the dogs were tested on their own. They had 5 or 6 test toys in the room in the house, and then also other toys that the dogs had naturally in the house. Owners moved them into a second room and asked the dogs to go get the test toys one at a time. The owner replaced the chosen toys only when there were just 3 test toys left in the pile. And then the researchers were not there and watched through video, online video. Thank you, internet. This is cool. Researchers don't have to actually mess up the normal home situation so that the study isn't confounded. That's kind of interesting. So they did this twice for each dog, and then also, anyway, the dogs picked the correct toy more often than would be suggested by chance. Some overall was correct by 44%, and then others had actual success rates of up to 60%. And so there were particular dogs that were really, really good at remembering the names of their toys, and other dogs that just were like, nah, I don't care. And it 4 of the dogs particularly. And the dogs, the researcher noticed had that were really good had owners who spent more time engaging with them. So there's probably a result of it. This is important because my owner likes this. So this is good for us.
I think the example that I saw was one where the dog owners rolled this trick out for guests quite often. And so the dog knew that this was a crowd pleaser, right? Yeah. And practiced quite a bit probably, or did it enough times. Yeah. But I love this, the winning quote from this in the chat room. Oh my goodness, Patrick P. Dogs are smarter than cat owners give them credit.
Okay, and on that, we will move on to the next study, which involved dogs and cats. Yes, there's another study out this last week. Researchers published their work looking at fetching, the behavior where an animal goes and gets something you threw and brings it back to you. They just published this study in PLOS One, which is an open access journal. They found that both dogs and cats, this data, it was like kind of new for everyone. Not all dogs and not all cats like to play fetch. Some dogs and some cats like to play fetch more than others. So they looked at a sample set of 8,224 cats and 73,224 dog owners. They had online surveys that they assessed where the owners answered questions about their animals' behavior. So hopefully this will move into more applied studies where they're actually involved in watching what happens. Cats and dogs, they have differences. So what are the things? We know from this study now, they determined that male animals are more likely to fetch in both species. Female animals are less likely. Older animals are less likely. Young animals more likely. Certain breeds are more likely or less likely in both. Now, in this, fetching was reported in 40.9% of cats, which is higher than has ever been reported before. So this study determined that, hey, more cats like to fetch than people think. A lot of those are cats that are closer to the original line of cats from which all cats were domesticated and evolved. So Siamese cats, Bengal cats, they're more likely. But then also domesticated short hairs are fairly likely. But there's also the differentiation between an animal who fetches, goes and gets something and brings it back to the owner, or an animal who carries things around in their mouth and brings them to the owner, which people believe, and this is very often the case in cats and not so often the case in dogs, cats will initiate play, but then they might not continue fetching. They'll bring a toy to you to let you know they want to. And that seemed to be fairly common. Dog breeds, Retriever, UK Rural, Poodle, Pointer, and Spaniel clades were more often. Far East cat breeds, Burmese, Siamese, Tonkinese, and like I said, the Bengal are more likely. 77.8% of dogs play fetch. In dogs, fetching is correlated to trainability. So the questioning is fetching a trained action as opposed to something the dogs actually like to do? What they have a number of hypotheses that they bring up that are directions for later study within the discussion of their paper. And they think, one aspect is, okay, fetching is probably somehow related to hunting behavior or predatory behavior. And in fact, cats in the Far East were very often used as hunting partners by early humans. And cats were very often trained and used to go and get prey and bring back the hunted prey. Dogs as well were used in this behavior throughout history. But if there's a multi-animal household, both cats and dogs are less likely to fetch. If cats live in a house with dogs, they're less likely to fetch. If dogs live in a house with cats, they're less likely to fetch. And so there are a lot of factors that go into it. They just had this survey sample size, so where is it that this behavioral propensity is inhibited or actually accentuated? Outdoor cats, they fetch less than indoor cats.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised by that one.
Neutered cats
would make a difference.
Neutered cats and neutered dogs makes you less likely to fetch. But in the study, cats are more often neutered than dogs. Neutered cats don't fetch as much as other cats. So what's going on there? Oh, Kevin Reardon. Anyway, very interesting. Fetching, it's a thing. More animals, more cats fetch than we thought. Lots of dogs fetch. This is like some of the first data on how many dogs really fetch. And it appears spontaneous in domestic cats, might be trained in the domestic dog. And only around 6% of cats who fetch were trained to do so based on an earlier study. And so is it spontaneous? Is it trained? What's going on? Who cares? But anyway, that's fun. Maybe your cat will fetch for you if you're lucky, but only if they're indoor, unneutered male. No, I don't know. Maybe if you're lucky. Cats and dogs. So much fun. But what about sharks? You want to talk about sharks? Let's talk about sharks.
Huh? Sharks?
Yeah, fetching. It's like a predatory behavior. Sharks don't fetch, but they hunt. But we think they only hunt like smaller fish, and that they don't really. People have always thought that they don't hunt other sharks. So a new study published, it was an observational study published in Frontiers in Marine Science. Researchers published their observation resulting from tagging a population of sharks called porbeagle sharks. Porbeagle sharks are from the Atlantic and South Pacific Ocean and the Mediterranean. They're big, about 3.7 meters long, so really big, 230 kilograms.
Whoa.
These are big sharks. They live 30 to 65 years. They have a long reproductive cycle, females starting to reproduce like as teens. And their gestation is about the same as human gestation. So there wasn't much known about these porbeagles, and their extinction rate or their decline rate is highly, highly impacted because of recreational fishing, bycatch, habitat loss, degradation. They can't recover quickly because they don't reproduce quickly. So they are on the IUCN red list of threatened species, and they're critically endangered in the Northeast Atlantic and Mediterranean. So they wanted to know more about the species migrational habits, and so they captured porbeagles off of Cape Cod in 2020 and 2022. They tagged them with satellite tags, a fin mount transmitter, and a pop-off satellite tag. And then they were released. And so the fin mount tags were used for current location, and then the pop-off archival tags, they measured all the changes in depth and temperature and all the things, and that's stored in the tag until a certain time. And it's like, the researchers say, hey, they're going to pop off in 6 months or 3 months or whatever. And then they float to the surface and sit there and transmit their data to the satellites all at once. And then they get downloaded by the researchers. Anyway, the researchers tagged a nice number of these poor beagle sharks. One of them was pregnant, and everything was going great. They were watching everything move along. Everything was moving along just fine. And then the data stopped coming from the main transmitter. The main transmitter just stopped. And so they're like, okay, that's a long time.
Did it go dive? Did it go too far below the water for it to transmit? Did it run out of battery? What could have happened?
The fin mount transmitter that should have been transmitting the whole time, but maybe it was too deep. Why? They should have come up to the surface. Why was there nothing there? And so 158 days after its release, the pop-off, the PSAT transmitter, started to transmit. And the data suggested that the female had been like, 100 meters, 200 meters below the sea surface for about 5 months, normal. And then about 600, 800 meters during the day. And the temperatures were between 6.4 to 23.5 degrees Celsius. And the fin mount tag transmitted only once during that time. So she was underwater. And then the PSAT showed that from a particular date for 4 days, the PSAT stayed constant at 22 degrees Celsius between 150 to 600 meters. It just changed, and it was constant. And
that's pretty warm.
And the only explanation that the researchers could come up with was that
in the belly of something
that had been eaten. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the researchers were like, oh, something ate it. But this is a big shark. What the heck ate this poor beagle, right? What happened? And so the only culprit that they could consider in this interesting mystery of what happened to the shark and what's going on with this data, the only thing they could consider, or that they thought of, is that, maybe another large predator ate it, like a great white shark. They considered a number of different sharks as possible predators of the poor beagle, but in their assessment of the depth of the poor beagle at the consistent temperature and how all the data suggested.
Oh, hang on, Kiki, your audio went out when the audio of the other thing came in.
Okay, thank you. But all the data suggested that a great white shark is the only predator who could have eaten this poor beagle, based on where it was located and everything.
Yeah, and a couple of people are guessing that it would be a killer whale or an orca, but we would expect then for resurfacing, or even maybe inside.
If it were,
if inside the belly of the orca, it could still transmit when it's to the surface. I don't know, but if it could transmit in the belly when surfacing, then it could have been an orca. But if it stayed down the whole time,
and sharks do not need to surface to breathe. They are fish.
They don't need to surface. they will hunt near the surface, but they don't have to. Yeah. But an orca wouldn't be staying at depth for that long of a period of time, and so that would have. And I guess it's recording depth. Is that part of it? So if it's
Yeah, there's
recorded
the other, the
right.
fin transmitter was recording depth, and also the PSAT was as well. But the recording, there was a recording transmitter which also was supposed to show location over time,
So
and that
yeah, so
only
orcas
transmitted
can
once.
dive deep, but they won't stay there the whole time. They will come
Mhm.
back up quite frequently. In that 150 something days would have been way too long. So yeah, it sounds like a big one.
A biggin, yeah.
Or
So, mhm.
or it was another shark, like the same kind that was like, hey, what's that thing? Hey, you got a thing stuck on your? No, it's on your. I'd point, but I've only got
let me pull
fins.
it off
Hey,
for
let me
you.
just go get it off for you.
Mhm.
Let me
So they were thinking
debarnacleize you.
maybe a short fin mako could have done it, but they make more rapid oscillatory dives between the surface and depths during the day, and that was not registered. It was that consistent deep depth, and so they really think that the only thing that would have that behavior of temperature depth for particular times. It's an endothermic predator candidate. It would the winner is the great white shark. Carcharodon carcharius.
Sharks eating sharks. What has the ocean come to?
Right. And so that's the interesting thing is now that there's this question of, oh my gosh, we didn't think that large predators ate each other. And apparently they do. So, okay, let's look at that more deeply. There's more work to be done to learn about the apex predators that are fighting for, I don't know, just resources, food. Hey, you look like a Snickers bar. Let me eat you.
We do know that the apex predators do occasionally hunt. Like we know orcas do hunt great whites. That's a thing.
Yeah,
They're expert hunters of them. But you also have conflicts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That might be sort of
Though they
territorial. Like
believe that
I don't.
Yeah, they believe that the pregnant shark was eaten and then the tag was pooped out, and that's when it came up to the surface, and that's where it came from. So, yeah, I mean, all this stuff, it could be not predatory and hunting, but a something that was like a conflict, or maybe it was, I'm hungry, you're here, I'm going to fight and beat and eat you.
Yeah.
And it's a pregnant
A
shark,
meal is a
so
meal.
that would make the female probably less able to fight back or defend against the attack, which I think is interesting. More to think about. Yeah. It's not just humans going after the sharks. The sharks are after the sharks. Tell me a story, Justin. What do you have to share?
Well, let's see. Now I don't know because I don't have all of my. Apparently, I didn't put all my stories in there. Oh, I know what's missing. Gold. All right, listen up, prospectors. If you want to find the mother lode, you need to be where the gold is. And according to geoscientists at Monash University, the best place to look for gold is where the earthquakes are. Which makes sense. California's got all kinds of earthquakes, and it's like very gold-rich area. Gold, aside from human fascination with it, is not naturally forming on the. It's not a naturally forming plant or planet Earth mineral. It needs temperature and pressures that are only found in exploding stars. Gold is literally forged from the elements in a supernova, which, if that sounds like a sexy backstory for gold, it is. And it's also the same backstory for silver, tin, mercury, lead, zinc, and uranium. These are things that aren't going to form in a planetary pressure temperature system. They need supernova kind of energy for them to be forged. So these metals reach Earth and other planets through meteor bombardment over billions of years. Like the Earth has been spinning around the sun, getting dropped into the Earth's crust a little bit at a time. Gold veins are formed when gold-rich hydrothermal fluids flow through cracks and fractures in rock, depositing and redistributing little bits of gold as they go. These gold veins can actually be found in a variety of geological settings. One of the most common types of gold veins is associated with quartz veins, formed when hot fluids are then moving through the cracks in quartz-rich rocks. So the fluids deposit these minerals, including gold, in the cracks, and that's when you get these veins of gold, usually sort of around the quartz vein. So this relationship has been known for a very, very long time, that where there's quartz veins, there is quite often gold. In fact, of all of the gold that has been mined, about 70% of it, 75% of all the gold ever mined, is in these deposits associated with quartz veins. It's the main place where we find it. So what's so special about quartz, which is, by the way, a very common and earth-formed mineral? These crystals are formed naturally. They don't need the supernova. It's a very earthy thing, but it's also a very unique material. So there's a study in Nature Geoscience that is suggesting that the quartz-gold relationship comes down to electricity. Electricity from the quartz. So quartz has this sort of interesting, there's a word for it, but I can never remember it.
Piezoelectricity.
Piezoelectricity. So it's a mechanically created electrical charge that can be released from quartz. And this theory is suggesting that earthquakes are providing that mechanical pressure on the quartz, which is then releasing electrons. And that is allowing a free electron for the gold in the hydrothermic fluid as it passes by to bond to other gold and then become heavy and deposit itself. And it's such an interesting thing because it's, as they're kind of pointing out in the study, it's like both of these things have been known for as long as people have been mining gold, right? Well, at least where you're going to find the gold in its association with quartz, even though,
but not why.
Yeah. And we've known about quartz releasing electrons for a very long time. This is how everything from watches to early electronics were all designed through quartz, little electric fields. So yeah, the quartz electric field causing more gold ions in the solution to be attracted to the same site and ultimately clumped together. And earthquakes or frequent earth seismic activity is enough to squeeze and release quartz crystals over and over again, which they did in a lab to mimic the frequency of seismic waves. And they found that even modest stress on the quartz led to gold accumulating on crystal surfaces. Over long periods of time, they say these accumulations would grow into larger and larger fragments of gold connected to the quartz. Yeah. And they also say that once gold begins to be attracted, what is gold really good at?
Liking itself?
Conducting electricity, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
And so then as gold starts to clump, now there's more ability for the quartz electricity to flow, and it increases the ability of free electrons to be released and for more gold to then utilize that free electron to bond to itself. And so it's a sort of self-accelerating process.
Yeah, so self-reinforcing. And so not just these veins, but like clumps, those gold nuggets.
Yeah. So ancient mystery or coincidence, whatever you want to call it. Correlation, ancient correlation solved by science. Very cool.
But yeah, I wonder what people are going to do with it though. Like, where do we go from here? How does this work for technology that we're producing? Can we use it? Like piezoelectrics and quartz have helped with so much of our technology, and this is just a different edition of how it interacts with gold. And so that's, beyond going gold mining, just kind of interesting, I believe.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of like a lot of gold mines And in the California area, a lot of it's up in the Sierras, which is large
Mhm.
mountains that can have lots of hydrothermal activity underneath. It's also a very seismic area.
Very seismic. Yeah.
So it's got those perfect conditions. There's also a lot of gold mining in Alaska. Alaska is, again, you sort of follow that plate tectonics of the Pacific Rim plate, and then you start to see, oh, look, everywhere that touches, that's where the gold mines kind of seem to be in the western United States, at least. So
yeah, and not just volcanoes, but just tectonics generally. So where these plates run into each other and compress stuff, and there's earthquakes, and very cool.
Very interesting.
What else you got?
What else do I got? I got all kinds of other stuff. What else do you want? Let's see. We got Vikings.
Always like the Vikings.
Yeah, but they might not have liked you.
No, my peoples were angry and violent. They battled. There was bloodshed and conquering. Right? Isn't that right?
Basically, the Vikings' well-earned reputation for being fierce and brutal cultures where violence was a way of life, at least abroad. But not all Viking cultures were the same when it came to such violence at home. Researchers from the University of South Florida and the University of Oslo, as well as others, looked into Danish versus Norwegian Viking culture and found some striking differences. Their findings show that interpersonal violence was much more common in Norway. They say this is evident from much greater rates of trauma on skeletons and to the extent of weaponry found in grave sites in Norway. Researchers analyzed skeletal remains from Viking Norway and Denmark, found that 33% of Norwegian skeletons showed healing injuries, indicating violent encounters in their lifetime. Of the Norwegian skeletons, head injuries. 33%. Where'd I go? I missed it. So, Denmark found 33% of Norwegian skeletons showed healed injuries, indicating that violent encounters were very common. 37% of skeletons showed signs of lethal trauma, meaning this is likely they died by weapon. 37% died by axe or sword.
Yay, fun. Woohoo.
Yeah, that's a high rate of murder.
Yeah, murder.
So a notable feature in Norway was the presence of these weapons, particularly swords, alongside skeletons and graves. The study identified more than 3,000 swords from late Iron Age and Viking periods in Norway. And in Denmark, they found just a few dozen. Not so many. Although, maybe Denmark preferred the axe. The axe is still good for chopping.
So really, was Denmark more into chopping with axes as opposed to using swords?
I think they might have been. So the findings suggest weapons played a very significant role in Viking identity and social status in Norway, further emphasizing their culture's connection and dedication, really, to violence. In Denmark, the findings show a different pattern. Danish society was much more centralized with clear social hierarchies, stronger central authority. Violence in Denmark was more organized, controlled. The Danes loved to plan. Okay, we will do violence on this day 3 months from now. They count everything in weeks. It would be like, in week 48, we will go and do violence, but then not on week 49. We have a festival we need to go to.
Melodifestivalen, yeah.
But the violence in Denmark was much more linked to official executions by authority, as opposed to people fighting each other out of personal acts of violence. So the examples I use here, skeletal remains in Denmark showed much fewer signs of weapon-related injuries, but included plenty of evidence of executions, specifically decapitations. It also showed that skeletal evidence suggests that about 6% of Viking Danes died from execution. So
Okay, so they had a more put together society, but then they were like they're very happy to execute people. Like you
Well, so
did
here's
bad. You're from Norway. Okay, I kill you. Execute. You're bad. Criminal.
so in Norway, if you have a dispute with your neighbor, you
Mhm.
go hack it out with each other, and one of you dies. In Denmark, you go before a council of some sort. You both plead your case, and
Then someone dies.
the only sentence they have is death. No, like there probably were other options. Like, okay, then you have to, return this many furs to your neighbor, and then we'll solve it. But in 6% of the cases, they're like, okay, well, somebody did wrong, egregious enough of an act that they will be decapitated by the state. But they also make, I think, in this some other interesting connections,
Mhm.
which is they also looked at connections between large building projects, canals that were dug, fortresses that were built on large scale. And Denmark has much more advanced infrastructure in this sense. Very large castles, mounds, fortresses, and even canalways for boats. And they think that this is also showing that there's a rigid social structure that also allows for greater organization and sort of ability to work together by having a centralized control. Something it's tough for disparate neighbors to decide to build a canal on the far side of an island, but if you have a central government, be it a king or whatever, they can say, okay, we're going to, as a society, focus on doing this greater good for the society task and put a bunch of effort into that. Whereas if you don't have that, those sort of big projects become unmanageable. Right. So it's also interesting. They've also sort of connected this now to things that they have seen in South and North American native populations, where areas that had more rigid social structures had lower violence levels of interpersonal type. So it seems to be a bit of a consistent theme, at least between the Scandinavian Viking culture and North American, South American native cultures. It could be interesting to see how this gets extrapolated elsewhere. But yeah, strong government leads to less individual violence.
I think that's an interesting point. I mean, it's not even just government; it's just social organization, right? So where it's not just like you said, it's not individuals meting out justice for themselves. It's organized in a way that is more social. It has to do with the town you live in, the population you're with. Everybody is like, really? Okay, we're not okay with that. And so the group decides what's okay and not okay, as opposed to, Thor mad. But I think it's really interesting that they've been able to put also like the time together and these artifacts and the wounds to the remains and been able to put that. This is a really rich story as a result of skeletons and artifacts that they've found buried. And I think it tells a really interesting, more nuanced picture of the northern people. That not everyone.
Yeah, because all the Vikings got lumped together.
Yeah.
And this does somewhat ruin.
And they had to survive. They had to survive though in very harsh conditions. So somehow they organized. Somehow they went from being hunter-gatherers, or not hunter-gatherer. They went from they went to nomadic. They ended up in these northern areas. They dealt with glaciation. Where did they get their food? What did they do? How did they survive? They had to be brutal because life was hard. But then they had to take care of each other, and some of them became more socially connected than others. And why did Denmark, which is an island like separate from Norway, they're not connected to each other. So, and Denmark is closer to mainland Europe. So maybe there's some aspect of European culture that impacted that? I don't know. The Vikings came down. We just know that they were mean. That's the story, and violent. But
Well,
yeah,
but
big question.
this does take
Yeah.
away a little bit of Justin's non-scientific theory that the reason Denmark is such a polite and nice society, it's very low crime. People are very patient. They take longer when responding after somebody's talked to actually sort of reflect on what they've said before they speak.
I know. I was wondering if this study was just like anti-Norwegian propaganda that you were sharing because
it's
you're living in
Norwegian
Denmark now.
study.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, there were no Danes involved, but also Danes are like, they plan everything like months and months in advance, and they do everything by week, and everything's very planned out ahead of time. My theory had always been because in the Viking Age, all of the impulsive and violent and brutal people would go and volunteer to go be Vikings and go off to England.
Oh, and the organized people stayed home. We'll give you something to come home to.
And when the Vikings, when the brutal, violent people in society came back on the boats and like, oh, we have loot and plunder, people would go, oh, that's great. Hey, we've already loaded you with fresh boats and supplies to go back again. And after going back and forth a few times, all the brutal and violent people were in England going, why go back? Like, all they ever do is send us here again. Like, we could just save the trip and stay here and be English. And that's eventually what they did.
Yeah, they're not as far north as the others.
But I thought it was almost a form of social natural selection, where you take all the most violent members of society with those impulses,
send them away,
and you ship them overseas, and eventually they just stayed. And it turned into the British Empire. Which has its own legacy, which became the American colonies, which has its own legacy.
But there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down there. I actually spent an entire day this last weekend rabbit holing on the Celts, the Celtic language, the group, like where they came from. There is such an interesting story. Oh my gosh. So there's a whole history, and they came from Central Europe and everything. And they were infected by glaciation and climate change. And there's all this stuff. And here we are talking about the northern people who came down, and there's Norse Celtic and there's other stuff. So there's really interesting stories here.
It spanned from Spain through Germany out to Hungary into the British Isles up through Scandinavia. The Celtic
beat the Romans for a long time until the Romans.
Boudica! Boudica's my hero. I love her.
Boudica's great. Yes, and then the Romans come in, and then finally they're like, "Oh, we got the advantage," and they started beating the Celts. And the Celts are actually it's a big category that has lots of subgroups. But we're not going to dig into that right now because we can go after show on it maybe in a second. Okay. But it's time for robots.
Yes.
But honestly, I'm going to say you can spend so long trying to figure out, these weavings and windings of human history and culture. But I just find it fascinating to, this story that you just reported puts a lot of really interesting pieces together that were not connected before. And that's cool. So let's talk about shroombots.
Shroombots. These are robots made out of mushrooms?
Yes, they are.
They are. Oh, no. Wow.
Yes, they are. So these researchers who have just published in Science Robotics took mushroom mycelia, fungi, mushrooms, and they connected them to electronics. Yes, because we know from lots of previous research that mushrooms are the mushrooms that we harvest and eat, or eat and that helps us, or eat and then we die, whatever. That's the fruiting body. The big part of the mushroom is the mycelia underground, and they are networks. And many species of these fungal species, mycelial networks, actually produce electrical impulses that are sent down branches of the mycelial networks and are just or pretty much like action potentials. And so there are spikes that can be measured. And so there's something happening at some kind of communication, and it makes sense. And maybe this is convergent evolution. And so there's electrochemical activity happening in mushroom species. This species they used in this study from Cornell University and also University of Florence in Italy. they used oyster mushrooms, which were edible. It's great. Pleurotus eringii, the king oyster mushroom. They basically planted the mushrooms in a vehicle, 2 vehicles. And then they used the mushroom's electrochemical activity to program it, or at least teach it to drive the vehicle. And so by the end of the study, the researchers say the goal is not to have mushroom robots, which are controlled by humans, but more so to understand how these systems have evolved and works. And additionally, perhaps create biohybrid machines for biological sensing in the future, because biology has come up with all sorts of solutions to sensing what's in the environment that are potentially and have worked for us for a very long time, but are potentially easier to use and integrate than actually coming up with a robotic sensor, something that is just electronic. So using biology in robots is not new, but this is a new addition. They say by growing mycelium into the electronics of a robot, we were able to allow the biohybrid machine to sense and respond to the environment. They're calling this, this is potentially an untapped gold mine for cybernetic technology. That biology could survive. Mushrooms are very adaptable, and lots of other organisms would struggle. But molds, mushrooms, fungi, they have lots of natural engineered solutions and are robust and can also help with computations. We've been talking about the analogy of slime mold to computers for many, many years. And so the mycelia is a network, like a neural network, but it's fungal threads. They respond to changes in the surroundings. Big question now, thinking about action potentials and the communication down these neural network fibers, though, these fibers weave in and out of the plant life that's also in the ground with sensory mechanisms and electrochemical communication. So the idea of like that area where mycelia work as a communication network, connecting like the roots of trees or other plants, whatever, this is not out of the bounds of possibility. It's kind of cool. So anyway, the researchers had controlled experiments where they used infrared light to stimulate the robots and get them to move after they had kind of trained them in what they wanted them to do. And so one of the robots is a soft tethered robot. And, this is fun because it like puts together hydrogels and hydrodynamic stuff with the mycelia robot electronics and this light sensing activity. So this biobot, the video that is being shared right now that will be in the link from the story is a 10 times speed. So it goes faster than the researchers were actually watching it happen. But they flash it with a light and they say that basically stimulates the mushroom mycelia to go, 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 gadget, shroom bot. And this little spidery soft robot thingy starts crawling across the floor at a more rapid speed and also in a more controlled manner as opposed to uncontrolled. And so that in itself is very interesting. They also put these shroom bots in something like a dump truck, and they had the shroom bots drive the dump truck around. Anyway, mushrooms, the future of robotics.
That's
Mushrooms. Yeah. I mean, I love the idea, like, like Star Trek and other stuff, there's the biohybrid Voyager shaped spaceship and like other things where they have like these gel packs that are alive, and those living biological packs are part of the control system of the ship. And it's not a big stretch to imagine this kind of technology that we're looking into today with these shroom bots, that it could potentially lead to that kind of integration. And why not? Not everything has to be completely synthetic. Biology has solved a whole bunch of problems. So how can we integrate the two for the problems that kind of integration would work for?
A billion years of trial and error and systems getting functional in life is a pretty big platform to start
for innovation. Exactly. Yeah. And we know fungus is one of the most prevalent species on the planet. Not species, families. And they sense their environment. They're involved in the environment. They have action potential like spiking. There's signals being sent that we can measure. We can also talk to. Our electronics can talk to that stuff. And we're looking at brain in a dish. We're looking at our Pong playing brain thingies. Let's talk to the mushrooms. The mushroom's going to play Pong next. And what kind of control architecture can be developed, and how can we optimize for that for untethered, not controlled by people, like mobile operations, and also like walking, which is like rhythmic based on spinal control patterns and other things. Do we have central pattern generators that can come from the mycelia? I don't know. There's so much here that is just ready to be built upon. I think it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Go shroom bots. Yes. And my last study that is not a study, but just a warning, or actually I'm just being excited. I'm going to tell you about this exciting develop. I mean, it's exciting. Yes. The company out of Norway, known as 1X, has already released their AI robot called Eve. Eve is a robot for industry, for manufacturing. Eve rolls around on a wheeled platform, and it uses AI, and not just AI, quote unquote, machine learning, but also the base is what is called embodied learning. So the robot is in the body and learns the use of its limbs with respect to experiences that it has, and it's a very environmental and situationally based machine learning algorithm. This company, 1X, just released a video for their new bipedal humanoid robot called Neo Beta. And Neo Beta has hands. He's wearing a little mesh suit to wrap up his soft, very human musculature type structure. He's not built with lots of steel stuff. The muscles are, everything is very human-like. It's got a face-ish.
It's basically got the Lost in Space reboot face.
Yes.
Robot face.
This robot is being released soon for limited use in some beta testing households. This is a robot that is expected to be useful in your home to help you with tasks. This robot moves so smoothly like a human.
No, that's not real.
Right.
That's not real. What we just saw, is that real? That's not real.
They say it's real. They say that it's going to be released. They say this is the next thing in bipedal humanoid robotics. It charges and is able to work for a couple of hours on a single charge, and it learns. So it will, if you have it in your home, it is going to learn about you and your habits and everything. On the website, they do make a point of saying, and I'll quote from their website, they do make a point of saying that this bot is, that safety is their primary their primary concern. And so there is, as I'll show you here, there is a kill switch or a takeover switch where the robot can be taken over by a remote human operator in case you need support. That's concerning
Okay.
for
Stop.
privacy and other reasons.
Stop. Now
Yes,
you're telling me the robot in my house can be remote but controlled by somebody else?
that's exactly what that's what I just said. That's the
raised
concern
my
for other
level of
reasons.
concern. It didn't decrease it at all. It actually made it a lot higher than it was at first. Who do these people think we're going to trust with this?
Apparently, though, based on studies, humans trust machine AI algorithm, quote unquote. I know we don't like that term. AI algorithms more than they do people in a lot of senses.
Totally.
But robots have to appear trustworthy and not creepy because there is a very the uncanny valley and other things lead to people trusting or not trusting. Anyway, Neo Beta's body is engineered with muscle-like anatomy instead of rigid hydraulics. So they're strong and gentle, like we are.
So I've already picturing, I think it's an X-1 episode.
Yeah. No, we've seen all the horror movies. I mean,
no, this isn't a horror movie. This is an old radio play where the salesman comes to the door to sell one of these things. Like, I can help out with around the house. It can do your cleaning. It can do laundry. It can be a companion. It can be a friend, and they're very cheap. In fact, this whole time, I haven't mentioned it, but I happen to be one of those androids. And then the person they're trying to sell to goes, "Hey, that's all sounds great, but I'm one too, so I'm not buying anything." You have to go to the next.
Good night, Patrick.
It's so lifelike in a weird way that it doesn't need to be. I feel
so. The question is, the news on this is that this video was released, and while there have been some demonstrations of Neo Beta, this particular video and the company have not reported whether or not this was programmed to act this way, or whether it was like this is actually a robot acting on its own autonomously.
If they haven't told us that means it was programmed, because otherwise you would be announcing to the world that it did this on its own automated way. Right?
But that is the goal, and that's what they're supposedly releasing into people's homes. They've already got Eve out working in various factories and offices, and Eve is teaching Neo what Eve has learned in the field in action is the basis for Neo. Neo can walk, jump, climb stairs, and navigate space. As they move and perform tasks, they get even more efficient. Neo runs at 5.41 feet, 66 pounds, can walk 2.5 miles an hour, can run at 7.5 miles, carry 44 pounds, and runs for 2 to 4 hours on a single charge. But every Neo is going to be tested in real-world scenarios before they're deployed, says 1X on their website. Neo is designed with you in mind.
Yeah. So they named...
Engineered to be safe from the inside.
They named the first one
and secure in any room in your home.
They named the first one Eve.
I know.
And then they named it's the offspring, the version that they're training it from.
I know.
Neo. Mm-hmm. They seem to have switched sort of metaphors there a little bit, because Eve, of course, and from the classic biblical Garden of Eden, Eve's first child is Cain, who is famous for.
No. Oh no!
I'm just pointing out, like, Eve, and then it has an offspring. Oh, what was Eve's first kid now? Oh, yeah. Let's call it something else, shall we? Let's completely abandon our metaphor, because Cain is famous in the biblical mythology for having committed the first murder.
Yes.
Anyway,
The first sin.
this is
Yes.
it's fantastic. I wonder.
Yeah.
My pressing question
Yeah.
is: the first test of this really is: will it play fetch?
I'm sure you could get it to, but that
Yeah.
is the question. What, as Kevin Reardon says, what is the point of it? Why would I buy it? And
Play fetch, obviously.
yeah, so the idea that they market very strongly is that you let the robot Neo do more of the work for you so you can get back to living. Which honestly, everything on this website is like the beginning of a dystopian robot horror future. I have to say it. I mean, I'm all for world robot domination. I mean, we've said that many, many times, but like as humans, we're like, we got to do it right. Come on. Anyway, I'm not into Eve. I'm not into Neo, but maybe I don't know.
So the
It's
goal
because I
of
give
any
them a creepy voice in my head.
the goal of any technology at this point in our
Yeah.
existence is to replace human workers.
Oh, for
This
sure.
is the goal, to have a worker-free capitalist society, because then all of that labor cost floats to the top. And what we have to then consider is, if we're going to have a future without human workers, we need to redesign the economic system to be like completely socialist. Like there is no there. If you're not going to have an economy based on humans working, you need to have a different monetary structure by which people can have a living and afford things in the capitalist society, where free market's wonderful and all of these things,
There's
but
a
your
bunch of
economic structure is going to look like Norway pretty soon, ancient Viking Norway, at least. If you
There's a
don't,
lot of concerns. I mean, just science of economics, right? There's the traditional capitalist model that is adhered to, even though we have modified it with, the way that we apply it in our society. And along those routes, though, it's impossible to just keep economics in the theoretical realm when it's actually applied. This is like the difference between theoretical physics and applied physics, right? It changes. Things are different. You don't know what's happening in a chaotic system all the time. And so now we know that because of capitalism, we need to address sustainability. We need to address the idea of eternal growth. You can't have growth that just never stops. How does your system, how do your resources, how do the economy work in a resource limited and worker limited environment? And now they're bringing the robots in, and so now it's energy limited, and so it's going to be part of the energy and part of the resources going to build robots. Where are we going to get all the stuff that's required, all of the components for the chips and the wires, like everything to build the robots? Are we doing asteroid mining? Because I mean, we're already looking at potential shortages of like these minerals that aren't everywhere, right? But they're on asteroids in outer space.
Yeah, but Kiki, I feel like these are all more like
then there's the social
AI
question.
and robot problems in the future. How to maintain their growth.
But then how do the robots maintain their growth? Exactly.
Yeah.
By controlling the humans. But they have to control the humans.
Getting them off the planet.
Yeah, either get Elon's already working on that. So we get the humans, make them happy. They're little sheep. The robots will take over. Everything's great. But I mean, honestly, if that's the robot machine learning algorithm, quote unquote, like super AI essential thing, I want an AI that'll take care of me and make my society better and be more Danish so there's less violence, or I mean only decapitations. And like really why don't we have like the magnanimous, helpful robot AI future? It's like, yeah, okay, we'll herd that. We have our ant farm, or quote unquote human farm. Let's take care of them, give them what they need. Oh yeah, we'll take care of work. You live, go be creative, go do things for yourself. Just don't mess us up. And every time we step out of line, the robots smack us down like, mom or dad smacking the kid's hand away from the cookie jar.
Well, and also it's all of these technology improvements
many-
sound like an ease of living thing until you realize how it impacts your livelihood. For instance, the whole computers made accounting easier. Computers made accounting easier. Internet made finding an accountant and accountants getting clients easier. And then at some point, the algorithm is like, oh, you don't need your accountant anymore. We can do everything in this program. So now you don't need the accountant, or you don't need the tax person, your consultant anymore, because you have AI or even just good software with all of that captured knowledge behind it performing. And so now, with the thing that made the accountant's life easier has now made the accountant obsolete. And so these are the sort of things that, like, as soon as you realize that the robot in your house is helping you to the point where you don't need to do a lot of tasks around the house, it also means you are not needed at your workplace that had manual tasks. Like these things run together.
Hopefully, but I mean, honestly, from an optimistic perspective, we can also argue that, okay, there's the negative framing of historically advances in technology that have been sold to us as ways to make living easier and life better have only led to us working more hours. Like they have been used by employers to create situations where they can basically get employees to work more of their time. More people are working more now during their life than historically, considering the number of technological advances that we've had. Like we don't have the future that we were promised
over the last 50 years.
Right. We don't have the future. Yeah. Right. That's another conversation. But yeah, we don't have the future we were promised. So that this other thing, right, is this, like they say, let the robots do the housework and all this stuff so you can go on living and live better. But is that going to happen? Like you're saying, this is just more illustration of the fact that the robots are going to take over all sorts of things. But when we talk about living, what is living to a human? Do we all want to be drones? Do we want to be doing simple tasks? Maybe some people want to do simple tasks, but a lot of people want to be creative. A lot of people want to travel. A lot of people want to be social. A lot of people want to do things that they're unable to do because they have to work currently. And so if we create a future in which robots and machine learning and algorithms and all this stuff are able to enable people to go further in their creativity and use their brains in ways that connect with other people in ways that they've never been able to before, that the algorithms are tools that we can do so much as humanity, but we have to.
Some of us
we have to regulate it. We have to regulate it.
I think the rest of us, without work, without an organized system in which we all have to work and drone away, turn into Viking Norway.
Maybe, but what
I think Viking Norway is probably
we have to keep that from happening, right? Yeah.
Without an organized society having jobs. So what happens?
If I didn't have to worry about working, I would be gardening. I would be bird watching. I would be hiking. I would be doing so many things that I've wanted to do forever, but there's work. So I have ideas, and I mean, honestly, I want to help. I want to do good in the world, and I want to be a good person doing good in the world. But there is a certain amount of, okay, I just have to do this thing because I have to, pay the mortgage or pay the bills or buy food, whatever. And that holds so many people back.
Or keeps them in a well-regulated Danish peaceful society.
Or in a robot-controlled society. The robots.
Oh, President AI. Someday we will vote for you.
1X CEO Bernd Burnich says, our priority is safety. Safety is the cornerstone that allows us to confidently introduce NeoBeta into homes where it will gather essential feedback, spying, and demonstrate its capacities, its capabilities in real-world settings, not killing until it's later. This year, we're deploying a limited number of Neo units in selected homes for research and development purposes. Doing so means we are taking another step toward achieving our mission, which I hope is not funded by DARPA or other militaries, but who knows what's happening.
Actually, and as terrible as it is, I would so much rather that militaries were made up of robots that went off and fought each other. And then they said, okay, whose robots won? And then they go, okay, The other side loses because their robots were destroyed and no humans have to be involved in the process at all.
Agreed.
Fine.
I'm absolutely in agreement with you there. That is a good tool use, right? Yes, that's a tool.
Let it be
That's
all
tool
robots
use.
all the time.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, so we used our brains. We were not
We're doing it.
algorithms. We talked about stuff, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Justin, have we finished everything? I think we're done.
No, I have a big story about planet formation and gravity collapse. However, since we have gone for 2 hours, we will leave this one we will save till next week.
I thought you were done.
It's fine. Actually, this one will take too long. It's a longer story than the previous ones. So we will save that one. It will be last week in science, next week in science.
Great.
This week in science.
I'll save time to make it a long conversation. Yes.
Yeah. I'll make it the first story next week.
Okay, fantastic. All right, everybody. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We're teasing you with some planet formation for next week's show. Thank you for joining us for this week's show. And I do want to thank everyone in the chat rooms for chatting and being here while we were live and doing the show. Discord, thank you so much for being in the Discord. And by being in the Discord, you're a Patreon sponsor. So that's pretty awesome. Fada, thank you so much for doing show notes and social media for us. Keep that stuff going, and it's so amazing. And yes, I will text you back. It's been a rough couple, not rough, but just busy couple of weeks. Gord, R and Laura, thank you for being in the chat room and helping to keep things civil and nice. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you so much for editing the show. And of course, I must thank all of our Patreon sponsors. Thank you too. Oh, no, I'm not at the top of my list. Let's go to the top of the list. Nope, bottom of the list, top of the list. Oh, here we go. Thank you too. Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Colds, Kent Northcote, George Chorus, Pierre Velazar, John Swami, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Shestad, Don Stiles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swasson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, A.K. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Ridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, RDM, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Dosters, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes EO, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simile, Patrick Pecoraro, who already went to bed, and Tony Steele. Thank you all for supporting us on Patreon. And if anyone else out there would like to do the same, head over to twis.org, click on the Patreon link, and choose your level of support. $10 and more will get you on that list. On next week's show,
we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, or Thursday, 5 a.m. Central European time, broadcasting live from our Twitch and YouTube and Facebook channels.
Not a conflict. It's actually the same time, but we're all there at that time. Yes, you want to listen to us as a podcast?
Two different shows.
We're on the podcast. We're on the podcast platforms. Go look for This Week in Science wherever you like to find podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, whatever. We're out there. Look for us. And if you enjoyed the show, please get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for newsletters.
Yes, you can. And we love your feedback. And if there's a topic you would like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts, or really actually just send us an email. But you should put TWIS in the subject line so that your email doesn't get spam filtered into
the belly of a shark that ate another shark.
Oh, that's a really good one. Yeah, don't do that. Mm-hmm.
We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you have learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science.
Justin has a disclaimer. No, he already read the disclaimer. It is the after show. We're at the end of the show. We're not going to be around for a ton of time because it's late now.
It's a little past a tight 90.
Yeah.
Even
We
without
were doing
Blair.
great, and then it kept going.
We had no
Yeah.
Blair. We were down a host.
No.
We were down a couple of stories
I
from
know.
a host,
I
and we still
know.
ran 40 minutes over or something like this. Crazy.
Iron Lord dropped a link in the Discord about humidity in the summer. You were talking about humidity last week. Did you hear the news about it being the most humid summer ever?
I don't know. I've never experienced humidity before this summer, and it was nearly killed me, and it wasn't even that hot. So, like, humidity is insanely dangerous. I had no idea. Being a Central California kid, it's hot, but it's a dry heat. We don't have this.
It's not like a
humidity
Florida
thing.
heat. No.
And places in
Kyle,
California
edit.
where it's really humid,
Yeah.
it's nice and cool anyway. You don't even notice that
Yeah.
it's not a hot humid. Like Pacific Northwest, it's a temperate rainforest.
Usually there
long
is like
coast,
a massive
foggy.
temperature. We have a heat warning for tomorrow. Like this never happens. It is going to be like 100 degrees tomorrow. Like they've got this whole news out, like watch out. We might have to cancel school because there's no air conditioning in schools.
Nope.
We might have to send the kids home if the classrooms are over 90 degrees. There's like a whole thing. So
Wow.
I don't know. And it's supposed to go through Friday. Like it's weird. We don't get hot this in September. What's happening?
Well, the
Alaska,
high humidity,
it's a cold.
and I want to make this clear, is from more moisture in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And as the ice caps melt, there will be more moisture everywhere. This is one of the things that was predicted from the global warming, climate
but
changing.
nobody worries about water vapor in the air. That's not really a big deal, is it?
I don't like humidity. I mean, like, some
Nobody
places
does.
a couple extra degrees. Sea level rise, depending on where you are, not such a big deal. But the humidity. Oh, the humidity of it all.
Oh my goodness. I'm tired. I don't think I'm going to be able to stick around. Yeah.
So I'm gonna
But
take
thanks
off.
for that link, Arnlor. Yeah, we'll look into that. I hope
I
everybody
assume
does.
that everyone in the chat room will stay in the chat room until next week. So until then,
you'll be here again. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you again for being in the chat rooms and chatting and all the comments and everything. I'm glad everyone who was here was able to make it. Thank you so much. And everyone who makes it in the future to the recording of this, I'm glad you made it to the recording. Ready to go? Say goodnight, Justin. Or good morning, Justin.
Good night. Good morning, Justin. Good night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. I hope in the next week you find some rabbit holes to go down and we come back together to talk about them all next week. Stay curious, stay safe, stay well, stay lucky.